Welcome to this chapter of the St. Andrew Society of Detroit's Oral History Project. This project was the undertaking of the Charles S. Lowe Memorial Library Committee to capture members' recollections of the society. Recorded in January of 2018, these are the memories of Cathy Hasse, current Highland Games co-chair.
My first memories of the society are being downtown at the hall. Probably even, I heard about St. Andrew Society of Detroit earlier when I was a child and I went to Bob Lowe for the games and things like that. I probably heard about it then. But then I was very active down at historic Fort Wayne with Bill Phoenix, and he kept talking about St. Andrew Society this and St. Andrew Society that. So we went, my husband and I went down a couple times to the St. Andrew's Hall, and I can remember being very, very impressed with the meetings, with the members, the friendliness, and it was a male membership only at that point. And when they did take a vote, they would ask the women and the non-members to leave. Non-members could not be in when they were taking a vote, and even for some of the discussions. And this was probably in the 70s. I found that pretty interesting that, women were moving into things, but they weren't moving into St. Andrew Society. So, and even to be there for the discussion, I thought that was kind of, different. And then we went down to the hall, and I was impressed with, like I said, with the membership, the friendliness. It was kind of old boy network at that point, but it was a friendly old boy network, so I didn't have any problems with that. And then the Highland Games, then I think we went to University of Detroit over on 6 Mile in Livernois area. In their arena, we had the games over there, and it was a nice venue. Of course, the games were much smaller then than they are now. And then shortly after that, they moved down to historic Fort Wayne, and that's when my husband and I became more involved with the games. I certainly wasn't a member, and I think my husband was a member by that time. But again, the games it was a wonderful venue for the games because it was right on the Detroit River and everything. And we were at the games at the historic Fort Wayne for quite a few years, maybe 4. But then, like the hall, people were, it was a bad time for the city of Detroit. People did not want to come down to the halls. People did not want to come down to historic Fort Wayne. So that's when we went to the Eleanor and Edsel Ford House in Grosse Pointe. And again, we were very involved. We were involved with the patrons tent. We were involved with the St. Andrews tent. There wasn't a real organized group like we have today as somebody who was a volunteer chairman or something like that. So wherever you were needed on games day, they told you to go over there and work for an hour, go over there and work for 2 hours, and that was pretty good. And then as I became more involved with the society, I became much more involved with the games. The membership meetings when we were still at the hall, and then afterwards when we sold the hall, we were kind of like orphans for a number of years, where we went to different restaurants, we went to different halls, we went to White Heather Club, we went to the Commonwealth, we had a lot of meetings at different hotels around, because in those days our membership meetings were much more formal. They were, much more dignified, a lot more decorum than we're using today. And part of that I realize is generational, part of it's societal. It's just what's happening. The whole world is much more, casual than it was, 30, 40 years ago. So I have to kind of give that a little bit of some ink. The most memorable moment probably was when my husband became a trustee, because that was really an important thing for him. I had been a trustee actually before he was, but it was something that I was proud of being a trustee. He was really proud of it, and because he had worked and he just felt, and he was retired at that point, he could give a lot of time to the trustees, made a lot of friends, but I think that was probably one of my favorite favorite moments of the society, that they recognized him as being somebody who could make many contributions. Lost traditions, I could be here until tomorrow, unfortunately. So many of things that have been changed, just little things We don't use the decorum that we had before. We don't have the dignity. Our installation of officers used to be almost a formal event. And I can remember it was one of the first times that Peg Dunlop and I had worked together was when Bill Phoenix was being installed as president. And it was downtown at Jefferson Avenue Presbyterian Church. We had silver service, we had crystal punch bowls, we had, tea sandwiches, we had people pouring tea and coffee, and it was a very, very formal night, but a comfortable evening for everyone, and certainly something. And Bill Phoenix just died, and at his memorial last Saturday, that was mentioned both by his daughter and by his wife, that was one of the highlights when he was installed as an officer. I hope that in 20 years, our current president can say, yeah, that was really a lovely evening. It certainly didn't have the dignity that we had in 20 years ago, but I hope that Emma will still be happy that was a memorable night for her. We used to have new member meetings before they were initiated so that the new members knew what they were getting into. I don't feel that they do today. You talk to a lot of the members, and I do try and talk to them. They don't really know what's going on, and I think that that's too bad. I think that there's just, been something like that. When the new member initiation meetings, they'd have somebody representing the game, somebody representing the executive board, somebody representing the trustees. I bet most of the people in this society today could not tell you the difference between the trustees and the executive board. And I think that's too bad because I think that they're both very viable groups that should be recognized for their own accomplishments and what they're dealing with. Executive board, doesn't deal with the money issues. And the trustees don't deal with, what we're serving for dinner at some night. So I think, that people need to know, things like that. If they're going to be a member, I really believe in a group is only as strong as its weakest member. And I do think that that's really important. We used to go down to the Burns statue for a ceremony. Well, we did it in the early days on January 25th. Well, then the honor guard started thinking, it could be a little kind of cold down there in their kilts on January 25th. So then they changed it to July for Burns's birthday. And we would have a nice ceremony at noontime. And then, a lot of the people would go over to one of the local restaurants in downtown Detroit. It's always like a week or 10 days before our Highland Games. Everybody would be in kilts, everybody would be in Highland attire. It was a nice, if you like this, come on to our Highland Games next week. And that was kind of a nice thing. I thought that was nice. We used to have dinner outs, and they were every month on a Sunday. And the dinner outs would be pay on your own. The woman, Ann Darcy, who started it, she had 3 criteria. A restaurant had to be somebody that would give individual checks where you could allow bagpipes to play during the thing. And then one month she would have it east side, the next time west side, so that it fit all geographical areas. And I thought that was really nice. And it was an informal thing. You could sit with somebody who maybe you had never talked to before. And it was a way to develop a friendship, develop a camaraderie, that we all had something in common. At meetings, we just don't have that. People come in, even if there's a social hour, some come at 6, but some can't come till 10 to 7. And so many of our members have a habit of sitting with the same people every month. And in the old days, we didn't do that. We made it a point to sit with new members, somebody that had been a member in your initiation class that you maybe really never got to know, somebody that you worked with on some committee for the Highland Games. So then you could work with those people, talk to them and know them at the dinner out. And it was nice, and it was, some people, because it was individual payment, some people would enjoy a drink, somebody, just stayed with coffee. So there was never any kind of problem. But I think it really helped to get to know a lot of different people in our organization. I know that our bylaws and our constitutions are on the website. I think we should still have hard copies sometimes it's just easier than going to the website, and people don't always know how to use the website. I think most of the people in our society today are aware of, how to get into our website, But, and I have a lot of people say, call and say, how do you get into the membership, form on the website? They don't remember. And, this is something that we should do. We used to put flags on the table, both Scottish flags and the American flag for former presidents, so that they would be recognized at every general membership meeting. And it was a nice thing. And I think that those people that had served as presidents, they appreciated that, knowledge that, oh yeah, he used to be a president, she used to be the president. Last month, I think we had 4 or 5 former presidents at our meeting. Nobody knows who they are. Even the gentleman that I just mentioned, Bill Phoenix, who just died, so many people never knew who he was because he hasn't been, because of health and distance, hasn't been able to be real involved with us for a while, for 5 years or so. So most of our members don't know who he is. But had he come to a meeting and there had been that flag on the table, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And even, so I talked to a couple of people and they said, oh, is he the guy that used to wear trews? And I said, yeah, and so they kind of, if you described him, but that was it. But I think we've lost, a lot of, those kind of things. I joined the society. My husband had been involved before I did. And I really never thought until 25 years ago that I had Scottish heritage. I'd always grown up with a very strong Irish heritage and German. And then I had an aunt die, and I was doing so little cleaning out of her things. And I realized I did have Scottish heritage. And I was just so excited because now I could join the St. Andrew Society and become even more active. And I had been active, but I could be even, more active. And I think, that was kind of fun. And my Scottish ancestry is important to me. And I think when I listen to people like Elliot McFarlane, who knows so much of Scottish history, and you can always learn, no matter what he says, you can always learn something. Whether it's about whiskey, whether it's about the people, whether it's about a Battle of Culloden, or some little remote town in Scotland. And I have had the opportunity to, be in Scotland a number of times. And it's just always, it makes me proud to go back there and see, and people say, oh, Ireland is so beautiful, or such and such as that. I still think, and I have friends who are world travelers who still think Scotland is the place, it's really the most beautiful. I've been a lot of offices, had a lot of offices, and been on a lot of committees. I've been Highland Games chair for too many years, but I have enjoyed every bit of it. I know it's sometimes people think, why do you keep coming back? But I think the fact that all the money that we raise for that event goes to charity and scholarships, I think that's why, I do that. When you come to the membership meetings and David Martin brings in a couple of dancers or kids who are pipers who have benefited from our scholarship program, I sit there, sometimes I'm with tears in my eyes, that I am so proud that I was one of the people who made this money possible, or made that scholarship possible for that young people. Because if we don't, continue, especially Scottish arts, they're going to be lost. Things are, will kids really want to take, Celtic harp? Well, they want to take bagpipe or Highland dancing. But if we don't offer them the opportunities, they're certainly not going to have it. I've been membership secretary, so I know that the work that's involved in that. I think that the membership secretary is probably as important of an office as the president, because that is frequently that is the person who is the first person that someone coming into this society meets and talks to and develops a relationship with. And whether it's been Mickey or Rosemary or anybody, I think many of us that have been, Bill Baker was a wonderful membership secretary, and he initiated a lot of things for memberships, and I think that was really important. I was recording secretary, I was a trustee, so I've been kind of the gamut on the offices. I was on the search committee for when we were looking for a new building. I've been on the finance committee, I've been on membership committee, just a lot of different things. So I really feel that I do have something that I can contribute to the history of St. Andrew Society, because it's an important part of my life. It certainly was an important part of my husband's life. And, whether it's, with the memories of going back over to Boblo, when I was just a kid, that was fun. Did I connect it with really being Scottish? Well, I remember a lot of people wore, tartans or plaids, on those days. And you look at the old pictures from the way before my time, but, 1927, of the ones that we have here at the hall, the pictures, and the formality of, going to a picnic, and they were always in August, how much, that was, it contributed to, the love of Scotland that so many people in the Detroit area still have. And I think that's important. I think we can just, go on and on about all the good things that St. Andrew's Society has done. One of the other things that I miss, and I know a couple people that we were talking the other day about how we used to actually work in the community. We used to go to Gleaners. We used to work at one of the soup kitchens. It's really nice that our treasurer or our, benevolent people can write a check every month for $1,000, $3,000, $5,000, whatever it is. And I consider, I'm proud that they're giving $5,000 to that. But would I felt a little bit more personal if I had worked at that organization, in helping? And again, I think that that's where I learned to meet a few people. I think that was important, that I developed some friendships as we were preparing food down at Gleaners, or at, we used to work at the Royal, South Oakland County. It was in Royal Oak at that time. And we would do Saturday, we would feed the hungry on Saturday. And, when you're developing, serving salad, standing next to somebody, you talk about how lucky we are and, that we're not on the other side of that line. So it's really very important. So I am proud to have been a member. I continue, hopefully, that I will be able to contribute to the St. Andrew's Society. And I appreciate your time, Van, in setting this up.
This presentation of the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's Oral History Project was produced by Van Rohr for the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's Library Committee under the direction of Dennis Clements, current chairperson, and Shelby Brown Rohr, current St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's communication director. This project celebrates the 169th year of the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit. Salante.